We can think of ancient artifacts as gifts left behind for us by our ancestors. The only problem with thinking of them that way is that we don't always understand what the gifts are, how they were made, or even how they were used. Even if we don't understand them, we can't help but be impressed by them. And so we hope that you're impressed by the astonishing artifacts you're about to see in this video. Crucifixion is the most infamous of the execution methods used by the ancient Romans. But when we think of crucifixion, we tend to think of Jesus Christ. We don't usually imagine it happening in the UK, but we're going to start doing so after the first ever evidence of an ancient Roman crucifixion in the United Kingdom was discovered in Fenstanton, Cambridgeshire in December 2021. The discovery was made at the site of a previously unknown Roman settlement in the area. Archaeologists working at the site ahead of a planned housing development uncovered the skeleton of an adult male. The telltale sign that he'd been put to death through crucifixion is the presence of a nail driven through his heel. Scientists have dated the discovery to either the late 3rd or early 4th century, which is towards the end of the Roman occupation of the United Kingdom. Historians think that crucifixion was going out of fashion as an execution method by this time, but this discovery is evidence that it was still in use even in some of the furthest flung reaches of the Roman Empire. Our ancient ancestors experimented with many different forms of armor on the battlefield, constantly searching for a material that offered the right balance between protection and flexibility. Before metal and bronze armor became popular, the Assyrians experimented with armor made from leather. Here we see an example of their leather armor. It's about 2,700 years old and was discovered in China. The amount of work that went into creating the armor is incredible. It's made from more than 5,000 small pieces and 140 large leather scales, along with laces and lining also made from leather. The total weight of 10 pounds would have been heavy but lighter and easier to move around in than almost any other option that would have been available at the time. How it came to be in China is unknown. Its owner could have been an Assyrian mercenary working in China, or it could have been a Chinese soldier who looted the armor from a defeated Assyrian foe. Some historians have even speculated that its presence in China could indicate a hitherto unknown technological exchange between the two regions. The next stop on our world tour of ancient artifacts takes us to Turkey. In December 2021, archaeologists confirmed the discovery of a 1,600-year-old weaving workshop in the southeast of the country. According to the experts, this was probably the largest facility of its kind in the ancient Greco-Iranian kingdom of Komagene. The remains of the kingdom are now part of the modern Turkish city of Adıyaman. Archaeologists have been digging through the site since the early years of the 21st century and have found a plethora of Roman artifacts, including fountains and aqueducts. But they didn't suspect the existence of the workshop until they were right on top of it. It was possible to identify the function of the building because of the weight stones that are still inside it, which would have been used to make rope from wool. A little more digging also revealed the presence of crushing vessels, cisterns, and Pompeian-style millstones. The extensive damage to the remains of the building indicates that there was a series of earthquakes in this part of Turkey between the 6th and 7th centuries. The severity of the earthquakes would have caused extensive damage to Paris, the capital city of Komagene, and it seems that life at the workshop didn't resume after the earthquakes were over. All ancient artifacts have historical value, but some of them also have enormous financial value. As an example, here's a stunning Egyptian painted limestone statue of a man named Sekemka, described as the inspector of the royal scribes. It sold at auction at Christie's in London for an incredible $27 million in July 2014. Egyptologists believe that the statue was carved in Saqqara during the time of the Old Kingdom's late dynasty, which would make the piece around 4,350 years old. Before the sale, Christie's estimated that it would fetch only around $10 million. Somebody out there must have decided that they really wanted it. We know the sculpture is of a man named Sekemka because of an inscription on its base. Experts describe it as a living statue, by which they mean it's likely to be an accurate representation of how the scribe looked when he was alive. The statue would probably have been placed inside the chapel of his tomb. Its provenance before 1849 is unclear, but it was acquired in Egypt that year by the second Marquis of Northampton. He later donated it to the Northampton Museum. Archaeologists in China found a large-scale mausoleum in Xi'an, the capital city of the country's Shanxi province, in late 2021. It took them some time to identify the chief occupant of the mausoleum, but they now think that it's the final resting place of Emperor Wendy, who ruled the Western Han Dynasty around 2,000 years ago. This was a challenging site for the experts to assess because the central mausoleum is surrounded by more than 100 smaller tombs and even more burial pits. It's also full of ceramic figurines, all of which are curiously missing their arms. Confirmation that the mausoleum belonged to Wendy came when the experts found 4 tiny seals within the Great Tomb that identified the emperor by name. However, Wendy wasn't his real name. Emperor Wendy was born Liu Hang and was revered by his people during his reign for both his benevolence and his frugality. The population grew substantially during his 20-year reign, and the Han Dynasty's economy prospered. With that in mind, it's perhaps no wonder that he was afforded such a lavish burial when he passed away. He must have been sorely missed by those he once ruled. The world's archaeologists and historians haven't always paid as much attention as they perhaps should to places like Qatar, but that's beginning to change. Because of that, incredible locations like the Al Jassasiyah petroglyphs are finally getting some attention. More than 1,000 carvings have been discovered in this long-forgotten quarry so far, but there are still many more waiting to be found. Archaeologists think that the first petroglyphs here were created more than 2,000 years ago, but that the collection was added to by successive generations of people for several centuries. The earliest glyphs are little more than cup and ring markings, but the more expressive ones include ostriches, scorpions, fish, and human figures. They're easy enough to understand, but the multiple deep holes in the ground are a little more mysterious. It's been speculated that they could represent an early attempt at creating a map of the stars, but that's far from proven. Another theory is that the holes might have been used by traders to store pearls, or may have been a feature in a board game that was played at the site. We can speculate as much as we like, but the simple answer is that we don't know. Roman soldiers left artifacts behind them everywhere they went, but there were some objects they took better care of than others. A soldier leaving a knife behind, for example, isn't rare, but it seems that members of the Roman cavalry protected their face masks with their lives. The masks are very rarely found, but a fragment of one turned up at Hadrianopolis, central Turkey, in December 2021. The fragment is about 1,800 years old and includes the nose, part of the mouth, and the ridges of the eyes. It would likely have been molded to fit the soldier's face perfectly. The discovery was made within the remains of a complex site that might have been a semi-fortified military structure. Experts at the scene have identified 2 temples, 2 baths, a square, a villa, a theater, and a single heavily fortified building. The mask was found inside the remains of that building. This might have been a small town that had the equivalent of a military office to protect it in the event of an attack, but more work will have to be done at the site before that can be verified. Archaeologists in Finland were ecstatic when they discovered this snake staff in June 2021. Although, given the scale of the relic, it might be more correct to refer to it as a snake stick. The reason for their excitement is that the stick is likely to have belonged to a Neolithic-era shaman and is a dead ringer for the snake staffs that frequently feature in Neolithic-era rock art in the area. The staff was discovered preserved beneath a layer of peat near Järvensuo. In the wetland here, there is a prehistoric settlement where people lived for roughly 2,000 years after the first arriving 6,000 years ago. Images of humans from this era wielding snake staffs have been discovered on rocks not only in Finland, but also in Russia. This is the first time a genuine staff of this nature has been discovered. It's likely that its owner utilized it in some sort of magical ceremony, but the form and purpose of those ceremonies will likely remain a mystery to us. What we can say is that snakes appear as mystical figures in the folklore of seemingly unconnected ancient cultures all over the world, and we've never been able to identify the reasons for that. Mummification is usually an artificial process, but it's possible for the same effect to occur naturally in the right environment. The mummies of Qiaoho Cemetery in China's Tarim Basin desert are all natural and also very confusing. The civilization responsible for these burials stayed in the area for a long time. They laid the first of their dead to rest here around 4,000 years ago, and the last around 2,200 years later. The mummies are remarkably well preserved, including their skin, hair, and clothing. But the thing about them that confuses archaeologists is that they're so often buried in boat coffins. There's nothing but sand for miles around here, so what's with all the boats? To add to the confusion, the Tarim Basin mummies aren't genetically linked to the region's present-day inhabitants. An October 2021 analysis of the remains concluded that these people descended from the ancient North Eurasians, a race that was widespread during the Pleistocene era but doesn't exist at all today. They were technologically accomplished and, based on their burials, seemed to live well, but their apparent refusal to mix with other human populations appears to have led to them disappearing from history. Archaeology can feel like a glamorous job when you're breaking into a treasure-laden tomb, but not so much when you're examining ancient human feces. Someone has to do the dirty work, though, and in October 2021, a team of scientists helped archaeologists to unlock the secrets of a 2,700-year-old block of human waste that was found in the Hallstatt mine located in the Austrian Alps. The objective was to find out more about the diet of the people who worked in the mines during the Iron Age, and they were successful in that respect. The verdict is that the workers ate a lot of blue cheese and drank a lot of beer. The presence of so much beer came as a big surprise to the experts, who had previously thought that making beer through deliberate fermentation processes was beyond the knowledge of anyone living in Austria at the time. Aside from all that cheese and beer, the feces contained meat proteins, beans, cereals, and fruit. All in all, it sounds like a healthy, balanced diet, and we're not surprised that the workers wanted a beer after a hard day's mining. We're heading back to England now, and we're checking out an astonishing artifact with spiritual significance. It's this almost impossibly tiny gold Bible, which was found by a metal detectorist close to the ancient city of York in late October 2021. Buffy Bailey, who works as a nurse for the country's National Health Service, found the precious artifact while out scanning farmland with her husband Ian. She took it to a local museum, where archaeologists declared the treasure to be 600 years old. They think it most likely belonged to a medieval aristocrat or perhaps even a member of the royal family. Despite being barely half an inch long, it might be worth up to £100,000. The Bible is incredibly detailed for something so small, and the gold is made of 24 karat. Identifiable engravings on its pages include St. Margaret and St. Leonard, the patron saints of childbirth. That suggests it might have been given to a wealthy pregnant woman as a good luck charm, either during her pregnancy or for the act of childbirth itself. The farmland that the Bible was found on once belonged to King Richard III, who ruled between 1483 and 1485, so it's conceivable that it belonged either to him or his wife, Anne Neville. John Dee was a very strange man. He was a special advisor to Queen Elizabeth I of England during the 16th century, and also served as her court astronomer. In his private time, though, he liked to dabble with the occult. In his writings, he admits to using crystals and mirrors to speak to angels and the spirits of the dead. Dee was 100% convinced that his methods worked, and was especially impressed with the effectiveness of his so-called spirit mirror. In October 2021, we found out why Dee was so taken with the object. The Obsidian mirror wasn't made by Dee, nor is it English in design. Instead, it's an Aztec relic taken from Mexico, as confirmed by new geochemical analysis of the artifact. The Aztecs believed obsidian to be a material with supernatural properties. They used it in medicine and also in the composition of their battle shields. More importantly, they, like Dee, believed the reflections in the mirrors could be used to communicate with spirits. The question of how John Dee could have known what the Aztecs used their mirrors for is one that will probably always remain unanswered. Subscribe to the channel, turn on the notification bell, and enjoy watching new videos on my channel. Thanks for watching, and see you soon!